The Cheese Season 8 Episode 7 is about to expose a betrayal nobody saw coming. Tiffany just put Barry's name in Kesha's mouth, and there might be no coming back from this one. The South Side is about to get colder than ever, and this time, it's not the weather doing the damage, it's the lies. Episode 7 of the Cheese Season 8 is titled Icebox, and if that name doesn't already give you chills, wait until you hear what's actually happening behind closed doors. The official description says Tiff is trying to calm Kesha's worried mind about Nuck's disappearance, while devastating news pushes Emmett toward a decision that could change everything. That's the setup. But what's really going on underneath that setup is a slow-motion betrayal, and Tiffany is right in the middle of it. Let's talk about what's actually unfolding here, because this isn't just another missing person storyline anymore. People on the South Side are starting to ask questions. Real questions. Questions about who killed Nuck, and why nobody seems to have answers. Victor is the one bringing this up to Tiffany directly, basically warning her that word is spreading. And the moment he says it, you can feel Tiffany's whole body tense up. Because she knows exactly what's coming. She knows Kesha isn't going to stop digging until she finds the truth, and she knows that truth leads straight back to her own front door. Now here's where it gets interesting. Kesha has been asking about Nuck for what feels like forever at this point. Every single episode, she brings his name up again. She's not letting it go, and honestly, why would she? The man she once loved just vanished, and nobody around her seems to want to give her a straight answer. In this episode, she goes straight to Tiffany and asks her point-blank if she thinks Barry had anything to do with Nuck's disappearance. And what Tiffany says next is the moment everybody is going to be talking about. She tells Kesha that she wouldn't put it past him. Let that sink in for a second. Tiffany is sitting there, knowing full well what actually happened, and instead of protecting Barry, she's planting a seed of doubt about him in Kesha's mind. Think about what that actually means. Barry has been holding this secret for her. He's been carrying the weight of what happened to Nuck, keeping his mouth shut, protecting Tiffany from getting exposed. And how does she repay that loyalty? By quietly pointing the finger at him the second someone starts asking hard questions. That's not protection. That's self-preservation. Tiffany learned from the best when it comes to surviving in this world, and unfortunately for Barry, that lesson seems to mean he's expendable the moment things get too hot. But here's the real question everybody needs to be asking. Did Tiffany and Barry actually talk about this beforehand? Is this part of some agreed-upon plan to keep their story straight? Or is Tiffany freelancing here, making moves on her own without giving Barry a heads-up that he might become the fall guy? Because if Barry finds out that Tiffany basically threw his name into the mix without his knowledge, that's a problem. That's the kind of betrayal that could push him to start talking, and if Barry starts talking, this whole carefully built lie comes crashing down for everyone involved. And let's not forget, Barry himself gets confronted directly in this episode. Kesha doesn't just go to Tiffany, she goes straight to Barry and asks him where Nuck actually is. Picture that moment. The person who knows the real truth, face to face with the person who's been desperately searching for answers, and she's asking him directly. Barry's response is basically him deflecting, questioning why she even wants to know. That's not the response of an innocent man who has nothing to hide. That's the response of someone who is terrified of saying the wrong thing and exposing everyone involved in covering up what really happened. What makes this even messier is that Kesha isn't just randomly suspicious. She's connecting dots. She knows something is off, she knows people are being secretive, and now she has Tiffany essentially confirming her suspicions about Barry. That means Kesha is going to start looking at Barry completely differently going forward. The trust between them, whatever was left of it, is about to take a massive hit. And if Barry realizes that Tiffany is the reason Kesha is now suspicious of him, that relationship between Tiffany and Barry is about to get extremely tense, extremely fast. There's also something deeper going on with Emmett and Kesha in this episode. The trailer shows the two of them clearly arguing, and it sounds like a power struggle. Emmett asking who's actually going to run things in their household. On the surface, that might look like a relationship issue, maybe tied to wedding planning or just normal couple tension. But knowing this show, knowing how everything connects back to the bigger picture, it's hard not to wonder if this argument is really about something much bigger than home life. Could Nuck's disappearance be weighing on their relationship more than anyone realizes? Kesha clearly can't let it go, and that obsession might be bleeding into every part of her life, including her relationship with Emmett. So now we've got Tiffany quietly sacrificing Barry to protect herself, Kesha closing in with real suspicion, and Emmett dealing with his own personal storm that the official description calls devastating news, forcing him into a difficult choice. Everything is connecting. Everything is building toward something explosive. And we haven't even gotten into what's happening with Reg, Rashad, Smitty, and the rest of the Southside power struggle that's about to blow up because of what happened to Nuck. While Tiffany is busy trying to save herself at Bari's expense, there's a whole other storm brewing on the streets, and it all centers around Reg. With Nuck out of the picture, the door has swung wide open for new business arrangements, and Tiffany doesn't seem to be wasting any time stepping into that gap. She's shown linking up with Reg, and it's pretty clear they're about to start doing business together. Now think about that for a second. Nuck is barely gone, the man hasn't even been found, and people are already moving pieces around the board like his absence is just an opportunity. That's the cold, calculated nature of this world. Nobody waits. Everybody adjusts. But Reg comes with his own baggage. Just last episode, he gave up Roslin's name to Rashad, which means there's a real chance that information starts circulating and eventually reaches the wrong ears. If Tiffany ends up doing business with Reg and later finds out what he did, that could create a whole new layer of distrust. And here's something worth sitting on. Tiffany might start suspecting Roslin had something to do with Alicia's death, which, if we're being honest, she actually did play a part in. So if that connection starts coming together in Tiffany's mind, we could be looking at an entirely new conflict forming, one that has nothing to do with Nuck at all. Victor and Rashad have also been talking, and the word on the street is that Reg will do absolutely anything if the money is right. That's not exactly a secret at this point, but it does raise the question of how far Rashad is willing to go to smooth things over between Reg and the rest of the crew, especially Victor and Jake. Rashad seems to be playing some kind of middleman role here, trying to keep the peace while also positioning himself to deal with Roslin down the line. That's a dangerous game to play, trying to keep everybody happy while quietly working an angle in the background. Then there's Smitty, and this is where things really start to heat up. With Nuck gone, the 63rd Street crew is left without real leadership, and that kind of vacuum never stays empty for long. Smitty is shown having a tense exchange with Reg, where Reg basically tells him to stay in his own lane and let him stay in his. That sounds like the start of a turf disagreement, and if Smitty doesn't like how things are being divided up, that's a problem waiting to explode. Big Mike is also someone to watch here, because there's no way he's comfortable watching Reg make moves like this without pushing back eventually. What really raises the tension is seeing Smitty grab a weapon while surrounded by his crew. That's not a man preparing for a quiet day. That's a man getting ready to make a statement, and the only real question is who that statement is aimed at. Given everything that's happened, given that Nuck still hasn't been found and the people closest to him are clearly suspicious that something violent happened, it would not be shocking if Smitty is gearing up to get payback on someone's behalf. And that brings us to one of the most unsettling moments in the entire preview. There's a moment where a buzzer rings, and Tiffany's face fills with pure fear. Something is about to happen to her, or near her, and her reaction alone tells you this isn't a minor inconvenience. If Smitty really is moving with revenge on his mind, Tiffany might be exactly who he's coming for. After all, she's the one with the most to hide, and if even a small piece of the truth has started leaking out, she becomes the most obvious target standing in the way of answers. On top of all that, Victor is shown speaking directly to Emmett, and he says something that hits hard: "This is payback." That single line changes the entire tone of the episode. It suggests that some kind of retaliation has already happened, or is just about to happen, likely tied to Smitty and the 63rd Street side wanting justice for Nuck. And remember, the official description specifically says devastating news forces Emmett into a difficult choice. That choice might be a direct reaction to whatever this payback actually is. Is Emmett going to get pulled into something he can't walk away from? Is he the one who ends up paying the price for everything happening around Tiffany and Bari? The pieces are lining up for something big, and it feels like more than one storyline is about to collide at the exact same time. You said 3. Now let's circle back to something that could completely change the direction of this entire episode, and honestly, it might be the most important detail in the whole preview. When Kesha asks Tiffany if she believes Bari had anything to do with Nuck's disappearance, Tiffany's response is a little blurry depending on how you hear it. It sounds like she says she wouldn't put it past them, but there's a real chance she actually said wouldn't put it past her. That one word, swapped from them to her, completely changes who Tiffany is actually pointing the finger at. If she really said her, That means Tiffany isn't talking about Bari at all. She could be talking about a woman, and that opens up a whole new direction nobody is really prepared for. So who could that her actually be? The most obvious name that comes to mind is Kenya, also known as Len in some conversations. And here's why that matters so much. Len already brought up something heavy in a previous episode during a sister circle conversation with Tiffany, mentioning that Nuck was the one responsible for taking out Pastor Ezekiel, who everyone knew as Freaky Ezekiel. That's a serious piece of information to have shared, especially considering Ezekiel was Kenya's father. If Kenya ever found out that Nuck was behind her father's death, that gives her a real motive for wanting him gone. The problem is, as far as anyone knows right now, Kenya has no idea that Nuck was responsible. She doesn't know the truth. So if Tiffany is hinting that Kenya might be involved, she could be setting up an innocent person to take the fall for something she had nothing to do with. That would actually make a disturbing amount of sense when you think about how Tiffany operates. She's not just trying to protect herself anymore, she's actively trying to redirect suspicion anywhere except toward herself and Bari. If she can get Kesha to start looking at Kenya instead, that buys her time, distance, and a much safer position. It's manipulative, it's calculated, and it's exactly the kind of move someone makes when they've learned how to survive by watching the people around them do whatever it takes to stay alive. Tiffany has clearly been paying attention to how Alicia and Nuck operated, and she's applying those same lessons now that the pressure is on her. There's also a pattern worth noticing here. The show has done this before, where the official trailer drops with slightly unclear audio, and then a cleaner version gets released later on social media with proper captions. If that happens again this time, that's when everyone will finally know for certain whether Tiffany said them or her. Until then, this remains one of the biggest mysteries hanging over the entire episode, and it could end up being the detail that decides who gets blamed, who gets hurt, and who walks away clean. Meanwhile, Kesha is not going to stop pushing. She has spent multiple episodes chasing this same question, and she is clearly running out of patience. At some point, patience turns into action, and Kesha doesn't seem like the type to just sit back and wait for someone to hand her the truth. If she starts connecting the dots herself, putting together Tiffany's vague answers, Bari's nervous deflections, and the overall tension surrounding Nuck's disappearance, she could end up uncovering far more than anyone wants her to know. And once she does, there's no taking that back. This also raises a bigger question about where Kesha and Tiffany's relationship is headed. These two have history, they've been through a lot together, but loyalty only stretches so far when secrets this big are involved. If Kesha eventually realizes that Tiffany has been steering her away from the truth, possibly even sacrificing innocent people in the process, that's not something that gets resolved with a simple conversation. That's the kind of betrayal that creates real, lasting damage between two people who used to trust each other completely. And let's not act like Rosalind isn't still out there somewhere, quietly watching all of this unfold. At this point in the season, her name keeps coming up, her influence keeps being mentioned, but she herself hasn't actually appeared. That's not an accident. The show is clearly building toward a moment where she finally steps back into the picture, and given everything connecting back to her, including her involvement in Alicia's death, it feels like that moment is getting closer with every episode that passes. So where does all of this actually leave us heading into Icebox? Every single storyline in this episode seems to be circling back to one unavoidable truth. Nobody on the South Side gets to keep their secrets forever. Tiffany is playing a dangerous game, shifting blame between Bari and possibly even Kenya, all while trying to keep her own hands looking clean. But the thing about lies built on top of other lies is that eventually they stop holding weight. Every person she pulls into this web becomes another loose thread, and loose threads have a way of unraveling at the worst possible time. Bari is in an especially fragile position right now. He's been carrying a secret that isn't even fully his to carry, protecting Tiffany out of loyalty, maybe even out of love, and getting nothing but exposure in return. If he ever finds out that Tiffany pointed Kesha's suspicion toward him, even indirectly, that kind of betrayal could be the breaking point. A man who has stayed quiet this long doesn't necessarily stay quiet forever, especially once he realizes the person he's protecting might be willing to let him take the fall. And if Bari decides to finally tell the truth, there's no telling how far that fallout reaches, or who else gets pulled down with it. Then there's Kesha, who honestly might be the most dangerous person in this entire situation, not because she's plotting anything, but because she refuses to stop asking questions. Grief has a way of making people relentless, and Kesha has been grieving the unknown for weeks now. She doesn't have a body, she doesn't have a confession, she just has silence from the people who are supposed to care about her. That silence is exactly what's pushing her closer and closer to the truth, whether the people around her are ready for that or not. The moment she finally puts everything together, this isn't going to be a quiet realization. It's going to be an explosion that touches everyone connected to this lie. And we can't ignore what's happening with Emmett either. Whatever this devastating news actually is, it's clearly heavy enough to push him toward a decision that could change the trajectory of his entire storyline. Combine that with Victor's chilling line about payback, and it really feels like the streets are about to respond to Nuck's disappearance in a way that brings real consequences. Smitty grabbing a weapon while surrounded by his crew isn't a small detail. That's a warning sign that someone is about to get hurt, and if Tiffany really is the target Smitty has in mind, then her carefully built lie might come crashing down in the most violent way possible, not through a conversation, but through retaliation she never saw coming. What makes this season so gripping is that nobody feels safe anymore. Nuck is gone, but his absence is doing more damage now than he probably ever could have done if he were still around. Every relationship is being tested. Every alliance is being questioned. Tiffany and Bari. Tiffany and Kesha. Reg and Smitty. Victor and Rashad. All of it is connected by one disappearance and the desperate need certain people have to keep the truth buried. And with Rosalind still lurking somewhere in the shadows, it feels like this entire season is building toward a collision none of these characters are going to walk away from unchanged. This is exactly why Icebox feels like such a perfect title for this episode. Everything underneath the surface is frozen in tension, waiting for the right moment to crack. Tiffany is one wrong word away from exposing herself. Bari is one moment of frustration away from telling the truth. Kesha is one piece of evidence away from finally understanding everything. And once that ice breaks, there's no controlling what comes rushing out. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think Tiffany actually said them or her when Kesha asked about Nuck? Do you believe Bari stays loyal, or does he eventually turn on Tiffany once he realizes what she's doing behind his back? And is Smitty really coming for Tiffany, or is there someone else in his crosshairs that we haven't even considered yet? Drop your predictions down in the comments, because I genuinely want to hear how you all think this plays out before the episode actually airs. If this breakdown helped you make sense of everything going on in this trailer, do me a favor and hit that like button, because it genuinely helps this channel grow and reach more of you. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, because we're building something special here, and I don't want you missing a single breakdown as this final season builds toward what's shaping up to be one of the most emotional endings in this show's history. Make sure your notifications are on too, because the moment new information drops, I'll be right back here breaking it down for you. Thank you for riding with this channel and trusting me to walk you through every twist this season throws at us. I'll see you in the next one.